super excited to be with you guys here today, live on Instagram, live on YouTube, live in Facebook. Guys, we have some crazy power that's on this call right now. So, I always like to joke with my wife about having like a black belt in sales. And what we've done is we've just gathered. We have a gathering of black belts. Mr. Neil Weichel, for those who do not know him, is luminary and legendary, $70+ million man in commissions and counting. He's been a mentor to me and friend and just an absolute rock star. So we wanted to introduce you to him as we triangulate ideas with believable people with regards to, NAR, these rule changes, and specifically the tactics. Because what I've been noticing, guys, I don't know if you've been noticing this, is that a lot of people are spending time like pontificating and guessing what the outcomes of this will be versus actually getting into the kind of tactical, right? Like nose to nose, beak to beak, physical contact of how do we move away from defending to explaining, right? The advantages and disadvantages of offering compensation if you're on a listing side. And then also specifically, how do you go about and what do you say and how do you say it as far as listing buyers, right? So provided that this goes through, we're going to have buyer brokerage agreements and how you go about doing that. So we want to bring the best of the best on this call so we can triangulate ideas. So welcome, Neil.
Well, thank you. Damn, I thought we were doing expireds and buy owners. I bet here quick.
It's the wrong call, man. It's the wrong call. So you've been at this for a very long time. I think 30+ years, and you've always been a source for me because I think we've spoken every week for 15 years probably. Like no exaggeration. That's really what's
right.
True. So you've had an enormous impact on me and my skill acquisition, and just kind of like triangulating. So I'm aware that you are the one that really kind of instilled in me that leaders like prepare and everybody else reacts.
Mm-hmm.
So in preparation, let's say for this rule change, what are you, are you beginning to hear from sellers? I know the answer to that, but are they asking you about it? And then B, specifically, what are you saying to them?
Right.
To help them kind of educate them on what's happening and then the kind of advantages or disadvantages of offering out compensation.
So let's start with the first question, which is, am I hearing from sellers? Are you kidding? I'm hearing from everybody. And as you know, I mastermind with agents all over the country. Excuse me. And it's interesting to me that all of them are being asked, although for some reason, I don't know if it's a California thing or what it is. I was telling somebody my last 12 appointments, all 10 said, Neil, what's this I'm hearing? Some are really in tune, they're just, dying to have the conversation and they've read up on it. Some are just I've heard all this stuff. And we need to, as agents, be prepared to answer whatever. And of course, the best way to answer when a seller says to you, what's going on is to acknowledge that, right? And say, yes, well, there's certainly been a lot of information provided out there. And the first thing I want to do is take their temperature. So I ask the question, what have you been hearing? Mm-hmm. What have you been hearing? And the last listing I took, which was a nice house, just under $2 million, she said, well, I just kind of heard that commissions were going to go down, which of course is what they're kind of hoping would be the case, right? I mean, what seller doesn't want to pay less for the same service? I certainly would. And so I said, for right now, we really don't know what's going to happen with this because it isn't final yet. And so if it happens in July, we think it will, but if it happens, there's only really two things we know. Number one, we will no longer be able to publish the commission you're going to offer, Andrea, in the MLS. Okay, we're not going to promote it and tell all those great salespeople out there that we're counting on to bring you offers, ideally multiple offers. Hey, come show Andrea's house and you're going to get a 2.5% commission, which is what we need to offer to motivate and incentivize all those salespeople out there to come and bring offers on your home to get you the highest net possible amount of money in your pocket. okay, which is what you want, isn't it? Yes, of course. And all sellers. All right. The other thing we know is that if this goes through in July, the buyers, before they come through your door, are going to have to sign a buyer agreement the same way you're going to sign the listing agreement with me right now that says they can come and view your home, and this is my agent representing me if I make an offer. In other words, the buyer representation is going to be clear from the get-go. They're going to sign a buyer agreement just like you're signing a seller agreement. And that's all we know. We don't know if commissions are going to go up, down, or stay the same. We don't know how we're going to promote your commission to the agents out there yet exactly. We'll be told what we're allowed to do. But that is what we know. And all the rest at this point is just noise and conjecture. And she said, okay, makes sense, and signed it.
You have to practice for a very long time to really be able to focus on very small nuances, right? And the two things that I wrote down, and Neil, I feel like you do this all the time. You just don't even, perhaps you do realize it. One is you took the temperature. So instead of verbally vomiting and being like, oh, here's all the things that is going on, here's my chance to be like Professor Neil. Like, yeah, I know it's a little bit confusing, with everything's going around. What have you been hearing? And then to hear which area you need to focus on or what you even need to talk about. So that's the first thing that everybody that's watching this and that will watch the replay needs to integrate into what it is that they're doing. The second thing is when you were explaining, the first rule about offering compensation in the multiple listing service, you actually assumptively, you did something assumptively with your language. What you said is, I just took notes real quickly, like we're no longer going to be able to advertise in the multiple listing service the compensation that you are going to be offering to the buyer's agent. So for those listening, like you may not have even caught that, but what he's doing, it's neuro-linguistic programming. Like he's basically sharing with you, like, this is what we're already going to be doing. It's very subtle and small. It makes all the difference in the world though, right? In terms of them not only understanding, but also moving them in the direction of, like this is what we're going to do. Does that make sense to you, Jose?
It does, 100%. And I noticed that as well, too, how we took the temperature. And it's funny because when I was role-playing with Matt, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, that was one of the things that he said this week. Like, instead of verbally vomiting on them, just basically saying, like, hey, what have you been hearing? And because I think Neil's right. There's people that are very in tune to it, and there's people that are just kind of like been like heard it from a friend, but aren't really like all that in tune, basically. So you want to see what they've been hearing. That way you know how to address it or what to address.
Agreed. And I think what's really awesome about that example that you gave, Neil, because that was a $2 million listing. And I think a lot of agents out there are hallucinating or imagining that everybody who has a higher priced property is going to be like, rah, and like drilling them down and like, oh, I don't have to do this anymore. When in fact, you just took the temperature. She was like, oh, that makes sense. And then she signed, and it was probably at a professional fee that's in alignment with what you're used to getting. And it was no issue at all, correct?
Not for that seller. And let's be honest about this. All our sellers are different. They're different personality styles. They're different motivations. They're different situations. That's why you have to lead with, what have you been hearing? Right. Mm-hmm. Or, especially if it's a multiple interview situation, what have the other agents said? Right. Mm-hmm.
Because that's interesting. So I love that. So like, well, it's like, let's say that they've interviewed other agents. Like, wow, I know it could be really confusing. Not only are you hearing from the media, I imagine you heard different things from agents. So I'm curious, like where are you at with this? And then quiet. And then I'm wondering, what did the previous agents have to say about it? Quiet. So by asking those questions, what Neil is doing is pulling out information so that way he can make a very intentional, purposeful decision as to where to take that conversation, what he needs to be saying or not saying. Is that what I'm hearing from you, Neil?
Yeah. And I think maybe at this point, it's really important that all of us as professionals kind of address the mindset about this, right? Where we're coming from. I have done this a long time, Aaron. Yes, it is over 30 years. It's 33 years. And I think in many ways that this is really going to be great for agents that are listening to this, agents that are interested in being better at what they do, agents that are already great at what they do, because what's going to happen, and you know this, you and I have talked about it, is there's going to be a segment of the realtor population that just won't be here in 2 years because they don't have the skill set to explain this, right? I dare say to sell this to a seller or a buyer and explain why it's in their best interest. If you're a seller, it's going to give you choices. I don't think at the end of the day, the choices you make will be fundamentally different from the choices you've been making as a seller for 33 years, but we'll see. And as a buyer, it's going to professionalize that a lot, right? It's going to make it very, very clear what you as an agent are going to do for them. One of the things I wrote down in preparation for this call, if you want to get to it, is my presentation to buyers, not just me, but obviously my team, since I don't personally spend much time with buyers, I work with sellers. But this is what all of them are going to have memorized verbatim. And May 1st, not July, May 1st, we're going to go to buyer broker agreement, mandatory in my office.
Yeah, I love it. So 2 things I take from that. And then I have a question for you, and then we can get into the buyer broker side. Is the thing that I wrote down is agents have to make a decision if they're going to go pro or not.
For sure.
Versus being an amateur. So going pro, and everybody on this call has collectively spent a good portion of the time that they've been on planet Earth mastering the skill of selling and asking questions, and like the intellectual component of that, the emotional component of that, constructively working through conflict, negotiating. And it is a skill. It's no different than riding a bike, playing a violin really well, that sort of thing. And we've made a decision to go pro. And what I hear you saying is that the agent population is going to have to make a decision if they're going to go pro or not, or just be an amateur. Right? Amateur wings it. Amateur is like, oh my God, Neil, you have a puppy. I have a puppy. We should be friends and you should list it at this price, versus, right, knowing what to say, how to say it, having a very formalized canned presentation that leads to a very specific destination, role-playing objections, role-playing what they say, like, oh, the other agent said they do it for this, and really being equipped to have those conversations. The other thing that I love what you said, because leaders anticipate and everybody else reacts, instead of implementing this in July, you said May 1st. And what that does is it gives you guys an opportunity to work through kinks. Because the way that, I don't think most people realize, like the way that I learn stuff, Neil learns stuff, Jose learns stuff, is we take something, we triangulate ideas with the best, which is what we're doing now. Then we go do it. And then we come back to each other in the lab and I'm like, oh, well, that didn't really work the way I thought it was going to work. What are you doing that's working? And Neil's like, well, I'm doing this. I'm like, okay, cool. And then we implement that. And it's this constant refinement of process. So whatever Neil has for his kind of presentation for buyers, I would imagine with a high degree of probability, as they put that into action, there will still be tweaks and stuff. So let's say, Neil, that somebody says to you, well, like, unlike the presentation that you went on where she was like, yeah, that makes sense, and she signed, which there will be a portion of the population that do that. Let's say you have somebody that like really wants to dig in and be like, well, I don't want to offer compensation if I don't have to. So what will that sound like? Like, what would Neil Weichel say to educate them on the disadvantages and advantages of offering compensation?
Yeah, and again, I'm going to use the word mindset again. It's really important that we align ourselves with whoever we're talking to. And that can be by using assumptive language, but it can also be by being really real with them. I role played with Alec and Josh on my team yesterday, because they work with buyers, how to present the buyer presentation, right? And how to not just answer the questions, but use voice inflection, chuckle a little bit, take the edge off. These are tense situations when you're talking, especially if you're not terribly confident, about a commission for a seller or about signing a buyer broker agreement for a buy. Hey, you're going to commit to me for the next 90 days that I'm going to be your exclusive buyer broker agent with your best interests at heart. That's going to be hard for some people to ask for, right? Just like it's hard for some people to ask for a listing to be signed. So let's say the seller says, Aaron, I don't want to pay a commission if I don't have to. My answer to that is going to be, of course. I mean, why would you, right? Like, I've sold personal homes where I've hired the best agent I could find in that area, and I paid them a 5% commission to get the job done. Heck, if I didn't think I was getting a better result by doing that, why would I do it? I could sell the home by owner if I wanted. I could sell it myself rather than hire somebody else. But I chose, instead of doing that, to hire my friend, the last time this happened, Stephanie Vitaco, top agent in San Fernando Valley, and said, Stephanie, you're the pro, you handle this. And she got a full commission, okay? And I was very happy to do so. So that's my mindset, okay? And I realize not everybody listening to this may quite be there yet. But trust me, that's the mindset that we all should have. So when I sit down and a seller says, well, I don't want to pay a commission, why would you, right? I wouldn't either. Here's the choices, Mr. Seller, that you have. Number one, you can hire an agent that will do it for just a listing fee. You've always been able to do that. This new thing didn't change any of that. You could have done what's called an exclusive listing. You could have paid me 3%, and I would have been the only agent that could go out and market this property and bring you buyers. But can I tell you why I don't do exclusive listings? No, Neil, why don't you? Well, because they're not in your best interest. And the reason they're not in your best interest is if you've got me, and I'm one of the top agents in California, right? But if you've got just me bringing buyers by, that's that many buyers, right? I want to bring you this many buyers. And the way to do that, and I think, actually holding your hands open like this is fine to do, is to get this property exposed to every agent out there that has a qualified, motivated buyer that can show this property and write you an offer, right? The whole reason a multiple listing service even exists is to create exposure for your home and to create incentive to the agents out there to show it and write offers. The reason all sellers virtually do that is because it puts more money in their pocket, not less. So yes, you could sell this home by owner and pay no commission to anybody. And less than 10% of the sellers in this country do that. Or you could do an exclusive listing, which is to hire just me. And an even smaller amount of sellers do that. Or you can do what over 90% of the sellers do, and in our market, it's probably like 98%, which is to hire the best agent you can to get the best marketing you can, create the most amount of exposure, and pay the commission that's going to cause those agents to come and show the property and sell it. Now, I'm going to say that in December the same way I say it today. They will have the choice. Well, Neil, another agent says they'll just do it, at 3%, and they'll handle all the buyers. And I'm going to look them in the eye. I'm going to say, you're going to probably have more than one that's willing to do that. But can I share with you why I don't think that's in your best interest? Okay, fine. Why is it not in my best interest? Well, because here's the thing. Do you really want your agent, whose job is to negotiate, to defend your price, to get multiple offers, to ideally create a bidding situation where you get the price and terms you want? Do you want that agent who you're trusting to represent you on your important home also representing the buyer's best interest? What do you want, Mr. Seller? The highest price with your terms. Maybe you want a free rent back or no appraisal contingency or as is sale. What does the buyer want? They want the lowest price with all the protections. This is the whole reason the existing system works and has worked so well, right? Like I could go on and on, but for an analytical or a driver, that is exactly what they want. They want, boom, give me the facts. Tell me why I should pay a commission. Honestly, Aaron, I think the only discussion we're going to have is what's the commission being offered. I think most sellers are going to say, yeah, I want you representing me. I want somebody else representing the buyer. The only issue is going to be what's the commission going to be.
I agree. And I think that because of human nature, like the vast majority of people will say yes to that. So small things that I want to break down for people that I'm noticing, and I'm curious to see what Jose is noticing. Mm-hmm. One was when they say like, well, I don't want to pay a commission. And if you notice, Neil's response was like, of course not. Like, and I'm telling you, I need you guys to understand that everything that Neil does is very intentional and purposeful. He let you in on that when he was talking about what he was doing with his hands, right? And how he's presenting, but it's all super duper intentional. So What it reminds me of, Neil, is yesterday at 10X GrowthCon, I saw Schwarzenegger, and he was saying that he was giving a talk when he was governor and at a college, and somebody threw a raw egg at him. It landed right at him, like, boop, landed right on his chest. He looked down, brushed it off, and you know what he did, Neil? He looked at the person in the crowd and said, "You owe me bacon." And then he proceeded. And I love that, because that what makes me think about what you did, where like they throw this raw egg at you, where they're like, "I don't want to do that." You're like, "Of course not." Like, why would you? Like, I understand completely. If I felt that if I didn't offer that out, that it would benefit me, I end up with the highest price and the best terms and conditions. Like, why would you not do that?
Why? Yeah.
So is immediately meeting that with like playfulness. You chuckled a little bit, which breaks tension, right? Versus getting like all intense and like, oh my gosh, about it. The other thing that I noticed is your focus is almost always, if you listen back, for those who are listening to this, like go back and watch the replay, it's always on them and what's in their best interest. You're never talking about yourself. So despite the fact that you've sold, I don't even know how many homes, like 5,000 homes probably. And despite the fact that you've been the number one agent in your geographic area for the last, 16 years in a row, like all these superlatives that you could say to people, notice everybody on this call, he didn't mention one of them. None of this like, well, don't you know who I am? And I am the number one agent in town, and da, 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 da. None of that. It was all about them, what's in their best interest, and educating them on the process. And then another small thing that I noticed is when you said best agent, I don't know if you guys caught this, he went like this. Very intentional, very purposeful, right? He's like, yeah, like, or would you want the best agent representing, right? So little, tiny, small nuances in how you're presenting this to people that all play into their ability to not only intellectually understand what you're saying, but also help them to make a decision that would be in their best interest and serve them best.
He was like, you've always had these options. And what he said is you can go by owner, which you've always had that option, and pay zero commission. You can hire me to do an exclusive listing, which that's really what it is. It's an exclusive listing, basically, which you're not cooperating with the other brokers. I hadn't heard it explained that way, but that's really what it is. It's basically like, hey, you're hiring me to do that. But at the same time, if you hired me to do that, you're basically like limiting the exposure tremendously, even with all the resources that we have, which is true. So that's what I got from it. What I wanted to ask, Neil, is obviously you've been on 10 to 12 different appointments.
Right.
You've heard different things. What are some of the other things that you're hearing from sellers? And then how are you going about addressing the other things? Like, so what have you heard, or not what have you heard? Like, hey, what's this about a settlement or commissions going down? What if I don't want to pay a commission? Are you hearing anything else from them?
This might be appropriate. My son, Alec, who's sitting here with me, he's on my team.
Shout out to Alec.
What's up, Aaron?
What's up, bro?
He's over there. He said, hey, and this is what's great about having young people on your team, young to me, is they keep your head in the game for what different segments of our clientele are listening to or reading or whatever. And he goes, hey, this is what the New York Times put out on their Instagram. Okay, now I'm going to hit this really quick, because I'll answer your question, Jose, by this is exactly what they said. Now, this was not with any kind of, it was just point blank. This is what's going to happen. With one exception, they said this is what is going to happen. Now, understand, the public heard this, okay? Number one, prices are going to drop. Number two, 6% will no longer be the norm. Number three, commissions will go down. Number four, people, I love this one. People, because commissions will go down, will have more money to reinvest in homes. Okay? Like all of a sudden, my seller, who supposedly is going to have 3% more money, is going to be able to buy a bigger house, I guess. I guess that's the idea. There's going to be a new model for compensating agents. And up until now, our industry, specifically NAR, has blocked us from making modifications to the services we offer.
That's unbelievable.
Guys, we can all laugh at that because we know that's insanity, right? I just gave you the example of for sale by owner exclusive listing. 6% has never been the norm in my marketplace. My average sales price is over $1 million. It's always been 5, recently. So all this stuff would tell the seller, hey, You're having Neil out, you're having Jose out, you're having Betty out, you're having whoever out. This is the new rules, right? So we have to come understanding that they may have all that. So it's really important, Aaron, that we be from a position of, hey, I get it. What have you heard? And now let's kind of go through, right?
Yeah. And to educate instead of defend. Because what I saw happening on media is like lots of agents like, oh, you think that's all we do and we don't deserve it? Like, we do all this work and we have to put up with you crazy people and all stuff. It's like, no, that's not, nobody wins in that, right? Instead, educating people on the economics, educating people on what the actual rules are. Because what I find super interesting is you have all of these journalists who have no idea about our industry pontificating again, like you said, definitive. This is how it is,
right?
Instead of like this is what possibly could happen. But what I'm aware of is perception is reality, right? So if this is what people are hearing, it's our job.
This is it, right? If this is what they've been told, this is what they think. So now let me just answer Jose's question. I've already kind of gone through the options a seller has always had. And we all know that this is, what we have now is going to be the same for the next few months. Anybody who really wants to buy or really wants to sell is going to do it the way they traditionally have. Let's assume it's August now and this thing is in place. I think the question sellers are going to ask is, okay, Neil, you don't want to represent me and the buyer perhaps simultaneously. You don't want only you to be the agent that can bring me offers. Maybe that's not in my best interest. What if I just offer a 1% commission? Right? Since it's not being published anymore, who's going to know? Right? What if I just offer a flat fee? What if I just offer a 2% commission? This is what I really think we need to start getting prepared for, right? Is the idea that yes, commissions may very well come down. Now, none of us listening to this or role-playing this or discussing this right now know what our respective boards are going to say about how we can offer compensation. We've all seen the little meme out there, the joke about how to offer 3% in the comments, right? And that's all funny, and we're realtors and we laugh at it. But the truth is some of us may be able to offer it in other sections of the MLS, like the supplementals. Some of us may say, hey, click this link for our broker policy, right? Or something like that. My guess is some of us will have that. But the seller is going to want to know what should I do? All right, Neil, fine. I'll pay you your 2.5%. You're worth it. You're a great marketer. But I don't want to pay any more than I have to. What's the minimum I can offer? Now, that's where the rubber's going to meet the road, in my opinion, because a lot of the agents are not going to have the guts or the sales skills to say, here's why we should still incentivize those agents the way we always have, right? And my advice to all of us would be to pay very close attention to what's happening in your marketplace. And I know for a fact that I've had situations where I've driven multiple offer situations where we've sold a home for 30, 40, 50, Jose, I'm sure you have too, 80, 100 grand over asking price, because we had all these multiple offers. If the house warrants that, my advice is going to be that you tell them, let's make sure we don't lose one buyer and one agent representing that buyer, right? Let's make sure every one of them wants to show your property. The way that we do that is to offer them a 2.5% commission. And the average agent in this town sells less than 4 homes a year. If your home represents a quarter of their income, I want to motivate it, not just to show it, not just to write a great offer, but let's say we get in a counteroffer situation. They're going to be pitching your home to their buyer and encouraging them to write a better counteroffer to secure the property. If the other home they're considering isn't paying that agent as much, we all know that. That's called normal, right? Yeah. Now we have to be able to convey that, why it's in the seller's best interest to continue to incentivize the buyer, right? And if the seller says, I don't want to, every other agent I talked to said they're only going to offer a 1% commission, then it's up to you to decide whether that's going to get the same result.
Yeah, and it'll show
about result.
Yeah, and it'll show back up when you start having the price adjustment conversation. It's like, remember where we talked about compensation and what we offer out, right? We remember how we discussed how that could either broaden exposure or limit exposure in some way. So I think that your observation, I think it's very astute. It's human nature, which is that a lot of listing agents won't have the intestinal fortitude or the skill, perhaps, to push back and give the reasons why, this makes sense to offer compensation. So let's equip them. Let's give them kind of how to have that conversation. So the first thing that comes up for me is like, yeah, of course. I mean, that's an option. You're the boss. My job is to help you. It's never to talk you into doing anything. Now, it's funny because when I say that to Neil, he's like, naturally. That is not what most people do, though. Most people are like, here's all the reasons why you don't want to do that, and right? Instead, it's like, yeah, of course. It's totally an option because you are the boss. My job is to help you. It's never to talk you into doing anything. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over with you the different options that we have in terms of what we offer out, compensation, or if we do it at all, and what the pros and cons of doing so are. So that way you can decide what makes the most sense for you and your family, and whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%. So now we've set that conversation up. We're doing all the things Neil are telling us. Like, of course you can. Yeah. I mean, you're the boss, right? Then I'm going to give you options, and I'm also signaling I'm not attached to the outcome. Whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%. Fair enough? They're like, yeah. Then you go over the 3 or 2, and this is where we can triangulate amongst each other to come up with like, hey, what do we think makes the most sense? The different options. So like the first one is like, yeah, the first one is perhaps we offer out nothing, And I guess the question is how would that affect you and your family? Because that's really what I'm focused on here, right? To help you guys net the most and do it quickly and efficiently. And, let's imagine that you were a buyer and there were 10 homes that were available for sale in your geographic area. 7 of them are offering out compensation to your buyer's agent to compensate your buyer's agent. And 3 of them were offering out like something very small or nothing at all. Now, honestly, as a buyer, right? Which properties do you think you would instruct your agent to show you? Ones that were going to compensate your agent or ones that you were going to have to compensate your agent? And then be quiet. And naturally, human nature, they're with a super high degree of probability going to say, well, yeah, ones that they were compensating my buyer's agent. And then you follow up with another one to drill it down, which is like, well, why is that? Well, because then I don't have to come out of pocket. Exactly. And then another question, don't you think most buyers will feel pretty similar to you? Well, yeah, I do. Okay. Well, just by you saying that, and this is neurolinguistic programming, just by you saying that, it really seems as though you're beginning to recognize that the professional fee is in fact a tool that we use to market the home. And by offering out something, we increase the exposure, which ultimately is going to mean that we get you the most possible. Now, you do want it at the most, don't you? Yeah. So does it seem like this option of offering out nothing would really serve you best? Now, notice what I did with my head. And they're going to be like, well, no, it probably wouldn't. Exactly. So look what we just did. We took this whole big thing when properly explained and properly with a proper track. And now it's not a thing. They're like, no, I don't want to do that. But notice it's all in their best interest. Then we can go to the next option. Next option could be perhaps like a concession of some sort, because we are still allowed in the multiple listing service to offer out a concession, right? And what I'm seeing as we work through this real time is a concession of somewhere around whatever you want the concession to be, 10, 12,000, 15,000, whatever that number is. And in doing so, what we're doing is we're providing the buyer money that they can compensate their agent with, or they can use it for closing costs, which frees up capital that they can compensate their agent. Or the third option is we could just offer out compensation like we have been for the last, however many years. And in doing so, that broadens the exposure the most. We won't put it in a multiple listing service. We have various different places that we can put it, including when they reach out to us, which the buyer's agents will do, and we'll let them know. And, we'll compensate them, and that increased exposure, which means you get the most and do it in the quickest amount of time. So either one of these options are okay. Based on what you're looking to accomplish and why, based on the time frame you'd like to make this happen in, which I know you shared with me, you want to get this done in the next 120 days. Which one of these options do you think would serve you best? And then shut up. So I'm curious, as I run through that, Neil, anything to add to that? Anything you think I'm missing? Anything that you're saying that we can equip people with?
No, I think that's totally solid. It's pretty much exactly along the lines of what we would say. There's one thing, and I think this has already happened to me, right? So the idea of waiting to July to me is ludicrous. I have had sellers say, because a number of the agents in my valley, and again, we have a relatively high sales price, have started taking what used to be pretty uniform at 2.5 back in the day, 3, and then, over the last 5-6 years, 2.5. And now I'm seeing a lot of 2s to selling agents. Okay. And my method of presenting commission, when needed to be done was to show the seller the homes they compete against, right? 5, 6, 7, 8. I did this the other day. And circle what the commission was to the other. Here's what your competition is doing, right? Well, if I'm going to suggest to them that a 2.5% commission would give them the best result, remember, it's what's best for them. It's harder when a majority of those are 2%. Okay. Now, I'm not even going to be able to do that in 3 months because it won't be published, right? I won't even be able to visually demonstrate the way I'm used to doing and the way I like to do. And that's fine. So what I've been sharing with sellers is, look, virtually every home we compete against is offering at least 2.5% commission. There's a couple of 3s, there's a couple of 2s, which is usually true depending on how many homes I'm referring to. If you wanted to offer 2, you might get the same result. But can I make a suggestion to you? And they, of course, say yes. It makes no difference to me. You're already compensating me. The commission to the other agent makes sense. I want you to offer as little as you need to get the result. And I literally say it that folksy, okay? Because I mean it, okay? I'm getting compensated, right? Because you're suggesting this price, which is a solid, relatively high price for your home, Jose, let's make sure that every buyer's agent out there is excited to show it. Can I share with you how we do that? Jose says, sure. Mm-hmm. Let's offer them 2.5%, okay, instead of the 2. If for any reason the home hasn't sold in the first 30 days and we need to reduce the price, and you say, hey, Neil, if I'm not getting as much, I want to reduce the amount that goes to the other agents out there. I want to take it from 2.5 to 2. Let's have that conversation then. If somebody walks in and offers us full price, I think we're happy to offer them 2.5%. They earned it. They got the deal closed. You're happy, which is all I care about. The buyer and the buyer's agent are happy, and everybody moves on. That usually works pretty well, okay? If you're really having trouble getting a seller to offer what you know will give them a better result, right? Tell them to offer that at least to start with, and if they ever have to make a price reduction, we can address commission at that time. Hopefully the home is sold and you don't even have to have that conversation, but if you do, you do.
Yeah. And I think on the other side of that is like, if let's say you're on the market and it's not selling, you can, as part of the price reduction conversation, revisit what we're offering out, right? So it's like, let's say it's 30 days, hasn't sold yet. You're like, yep, I want to give you all the information that you need so you can make the decision that you feel is best in terms of, how to proceed. Whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%. Before we get into the conversation, I just want to revisit some things with you, revisit motivation. You're kind of to share with me, this is why you're selling. This is the time frame you want to make it happen in. Is that still the case or has that changed? Nope, still the case. Awesome. So with that being said, the marketplace is showing us some adjustments are in order. So what I'd like to do now is to go over with you the different options that we have and combination of those options so you can decide what you feel is best. And again, whatever you decide is perfectly fine. You're the boss. Fair enough? Yep. Go ahead.
No, go. Keep going.
Yeah. Hey, first of all, hey, how dare you interrupt me, bro? What are you doing?
Come on, bro. We have the great Neil Weichel.
I know we got who is he? He's like if I'm MJ and you're Kobe, who is he? He's like who's the guy who won the 11?
Bill Russell?
Bill Russell. He's Bill Russell, bro. He's on this call shooting like.
I'd rather I was Kareem, but fair enough.
There you go, Kareem. So
I was going to ask him. So what are your thoughts? So one of the changes that they said, okay, you can no longer offer commissions on the MLS, but now you can offer a buyer concession. What are your thoughts of agents instead of putting something like, here's our broker policy, this or that, or getting creative, to offering it on the MLS? I just want to hear your thoughts on that. As a buyer concession.
Jose, I have no answer to that because I don't know what the rules are going to be. Here's my mindset, okay? My mindset is to be fully prepared for whatever they give us. And more importantly, to be able, I really want to say this again. I can't emphasize this enough. You're going to be communicating with buyers and sellers. Nothing has changed about the reason buyers and sellers exist. Buyers still want to buy their first home, their move-up home, their smaller home. They want to go over there. They want to go over here. And none of that changes, Okay. Sellers still have reasons to sell, sometimes quickly, sometimes they have all the time in the world. Nothing has changed about the business we do. It's always about aligning with them, listening to them, and helping them. Okay. People are making, I don't want to, I'm not naive. People are making a big deal out of this. Fundamentally, this is going to be a very good thing for our industry. Okay. It really is. It's going to require us to do a better job of communicating. Mm-hmm. That's it in a nutshell. Perhaps you'll see some different variations of service, right? That you'll provide sellers. Okay, you don't want to offer a 6% commission. We can do a 5% commission and you get all of this. You want to do a 4% commission. I don't know. Personally, we're a full service company. We don't discount our services or our fees, right? But there will be options just like any other industry. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay?
No, and it's capitalism. It's like it's normal. It's perfectly normal and natural.
Exactly. Well, unfortunately, Aaron, a lot of real estate agent in our population, they're not really experienced business people.
No.
Right? So their reaction is an emotional one. It shouldn't be. This should be your reaction to what's happening is, how do I pivot? Right? How do I adjust what I'm saying, what I'm asking, what I'm doing to serve the needs of a changing marketplace? Right? And there will be, believe me, I've done this for so long. People always say to me, I offered that seller a 4% commission. How did you take that listing at 6%? Because they thought they were going to get a better result.
That's right.
It's always the same.
So the way I've been explaining this to Neil, we talked about this. I was like, like an airplane is a perfect example. Like you have options and choices. You could sit in the back and there's a certain experience that goes with that and a certain price. You could sit in one of the seats that have extra legroom and you pay a little bit more, or you can sit in the front. And then here's what I asked. How many times have you been on a plane and first class is empty? Never. It's always full.
There you go.
Which is like, why? They have these cheaper options. Well, it's because they prefer to get on first. They prefer to get their snacks first. They prefer to be a little bit more comfortable. They're willing to pay for convenience, right? So I think different forms of compensation for different forms of representation is with a high degree of probability, like we'll see that happen. And some people in your market will be like, yo, I'll do it for $6,000 no matter what the price is. They'll do 6 of those a month, make 36 grand a month. Great. And that'll be that.
Aaron, this has always existed, though, is the point.
Exactly.
Hasn't everybody on this call had an assist to sell, a help you sell, a purple bricks, whatever. And, my answer to the sellers that used to give me that objection was, have you ever noticed what their percentage of the marketplace is? It's very, very small. And inevitably, at least in my market, they go out of business. It's simply because that model isn't a very efficient one of delivering the result. Yeah. This is all about the result to the buyer or to the seller, the best result.
Yeah, right? And I think what you said too is very accurate. And then I want to get to what you're saying to buyers. So I think everybody who's watching this as an agent needs to make a decision of who they're going to be in the market. So what Neil's made a decision is he is Louis Vuitton, Mont Blanc. Like that's who he is. He doesn't adjust fees. He doesn't do that. He gives you top-notch service. He delivers the result and you pay for it, period, end of story. So you just have to decide, and there's no judgment from anybody. Nobody's going to be mad at you, whatever, but you just have to decide. But you need to understand that if you want to be that in the marketplace and command, right, higher prices, you don't get more because you want more. You get more because you become more. You have to go pro. You need to be a professional salesperson. You need to understand economics. You need to be able to guide people and be fiduciary, not just be transactional where they sign a listing agreement, you take a picture and put it on the market and they sell it. You know what I'm saying? And like that sort of thing. So that's just a decision that everybody needs to make. And hopefully you'll want to hang out with us who have decided to go pro. And if you're on this stream, then you must be one of those people. So talk to me about how you're training your team or those who your buyer, the agents on your team that work with buyers, including Alec, what to say and how to list buyers, because that's going to be a formal
same skill set that you've used for representing sellers, only you've got a new script. So this, and I realize we only have a certain amount of time, but this I think is actually going to be just as big, if not a bigger sales job for a lot of the people that are in our industry, because they're not used to it. We don't use buyer brokerage agreements in California almost ever. Jose, do you?
No, very rarely.
Yeah, I know certain states do or certain areas do. It's a custom thing as much as anything, but we don't. So it's very, very simple. When all the buyers are going to know this, okay, they're going to hear it, if not from us, from our competitors or both, or the news or wherever they get their information. And I think we explain it this way. Let's assume, Aaron, that you're a buyer and you want to buy a home and you want the best possible representation. And you've heard that now you might have to pay for that. Okay. Is that a fair place to start from?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. So my presentation is going to be very simple. It's going to be, Aaron, you are going to have choices about who you have representing you. Okay, just like sellers do. Sellers have always interviewed agents to sell their home. Now buyers are going to interview agents to help them buy a home. And they're going to sign a contract, probably for 3 months or so, that says that Neil is my exclusive buyer broker, right? Or whomever you choose to represent you. So you are going to have to compare services, because at the end of the day, you may have to pay for them. So can I explain to you the services that we offer? Now, everybody on this call should have a bullet point list that'll be a script that you'll use. So here's what I would say. Well, first of all, and Aaron, I'll pretend you're the buyer. Our relationships, the Neil Weichel Group's relationships, both with all the other top agents in town and our reputation in the community, mean that in a multiple offer situation, you're going to have a decided advantage over an agent they don't know, or one who doesn't have the reputation for being good to be in escrow with and getting your deal closed smoothly and efficiently. Meaning, if our name is on your offer, it's going to be looked favorably versus an agent they've never heard of or done business with. Does that make sense? Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Number two, we list more. Now, not everybody can use this, so you'll make your own list, all right? We list more homes than any other agent in Santa Clarita. And just as importantly, all the other top listing agents are constantly talking to me, telling me what they have coming up. And we actually meet every Tuesday. So what that means to you, Aaron, is I'm going to be able to tell you about homes that are coming up before they even hit the market, which of course is what you want with a tight inventory market, right?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. So number one, multiple offer. All buyers are concerned about it. I want my offer accepted over another one. Number two, I want an agent who can tell me what about homes before they hit the market. Number three, we know the area really well. My sales team has over 60 years experience helping buyers buy. We know the builders. We know which are the good ones, which are the bad ones. We know how the taxes change from one neighborhood to the next. The schools change. We know which homes, which floor plans actually sell for more than others, which locations are going to be the best, so that whatever home you invest in, you've got a great chance of better appreciation over maybe a home you might not even know why it's not as good a home as the home that we've shown you. In other words, we're going to be able to guide you, because you're going to be our client for the next 10, 15 years. And we want to help you make the best possible decision. So our experience and our knowledge about Santa Clarita, an area that, right now you're not terribly familiar with. Number four, you have an entire team of people here to support you. Okay, once we're in escrow, there's a dedicated person just making sure, holding your hand through the whole process, that all your timelines are adhered to. If we get into inspections, and we've got a vetted out group here of inspectors, lenders, people you can count on, if we get into escrow and for any reason, Aaron, you're uncomfortable with the inspections and you decide you want to cancel, we have an in-house risk manager and attorney that's going to help you get your deposit back. We're the only office in town that has that. Okay. And then last, we have over 50 years of experience selling homes for buyers. We have over 1,000 5-star reviews, and we have a history of quality representation, always putting you, the buyer, first. Okay. So you're never going to have to worry, hey, are these guys just trying to sell me a home, or are they really trying to help me buy the right home for me? Now, that's what we offer you. Would you like us to be your agent for the next 90 days? Okay. Now, anybody listening to this, you make your own list, but now they're going to say, well, kind of explain to me what this thing says. I'm really glad you brought that up, Aaron, because this is a little bit different. See, traditionally, it's always been that a buyer like you might say, well, how do you get compensated for all this great stuff you do? And I would say, our services are free, right? The seller pays us. And now that probably will be the case a lot of the time, but it won't necessarily always be the case. So let me tell you what you're signing up for. Would that be okay? And Aaron says yes. And I say, well, first of all, we're going to show you all the homes that meet your needs. We're not going to waste your time with any that don't. And we're going to show them to you regardless of the compensation being offered, okay? Because this is about you. Now, most of the time, the seller is going to offer compensation just like they've always done. We don't expect that's going to change fundamentally, at least not in the short term while you're buying a home, Aaron, okay? So you'll see the commission we're getting, and everybody will be happy. You'll buy a great house, the Neil Weichel Group will get compensated, off we go, just like we've always done. Number two, the seller may be willing to credit us for the right offer for the compensation that this buyer brokerage agreement says that you're responsible for. In other words, they may not be offering any commission or a reduced commission. And we may go to them and say, hey, I'm representing Aaron. Aaron's a great buyer, and here's his lender, and we can perform, and you're only offering 1%. Aaron's on the hook for 1.5%. Would you be willing to credit in our offer? We're going to write this for you, Mr. Buyer, the additional 1.5% because Aaron, frankly, doesn't want to pay it. Well, you know, at that price, I'll do it, says the seller. Okay, great. So number one, the seller will compensate us. It won't even come up. Number two, they'll partially compensate us, and we're going to ask them to make up the difference. Okay, so you don't have to come out of pocket. Now, you're not a VA buyer. If you were a VA buyer, Aaron, I couldn't do this. This would be off the table. But you're a conventional buyer, so it's perfectly acceptable. Number three, the seller's not going to pay anything and will not credit you. They're just, this is my price and that's it. And now, Aaron, now we're at the situation where it's a little different than it's ever been. One of two things is going to happen. I'm either going to cut you loose and let you deal directly with the listing agent. If you're comfortable doing that, I'll do that. I'm not going to hold your feet to the fire. Now, this is my decision, not maybe any of yours. My decision, okay, until I sort this out. Back to the script. Seller won't pay anything, and I'll let you go direct to the listing agent. Or you'll say, Neil, I love you guys. I don't want to negotiate on my own. I don't want to be thrown to the wolves. I don't want to be, at the mercy of the seller's agent to tell me what's right and wrong about an inspection, right? Or what's right or wrong about removing an appraisal contingency, or all these things that I thought were good for me. I want my agent. In that case, Aaron, you're going to be responsible for compensating us what it says here on the buyer brokerage agreement, which is 2.5%. Now, like any good attorney or other professional, that's how we would be compensated if the traditional means are not available to us. Make sense? That's it. Don't make this any more complicated than it is.
I love Neil. Hey, look at me. That's it, son. Don't do anything else. Just do that. So I'm taking notes as they're talking. Like one, everybody needs to be clear that you need a formal listing presentation just with buyers. You're going to have to list buyers. And that's what Neil just demonstrated. Here's, he talked about multiple offer situations, talked about off market, talked about 60 years of experience. We know the community really well, whole team to support you, 50 years doing this, 100 5-star reviews, da-da-da. Then he went right into, how am I going to get compensated? Now, this is the part that I think is going to be difficult for a lot of buyers agents specifically, because most agents are buyer heavy. So let's say most agents, because they've never actually had to have this conversation before. So what everybody on this needs to be doing is, if you do work with buyers, you need to go back and listen to this. Okay. You need to type it out. You need to come up with your own version with your own value stack, but this is the model. Here's the value that we're going to provide. Here's how we get compensated. And there's different ways we get compensated. Like Neil went over. 1, they provide the compensation. Great. 2, they offer a portion. And if that, we'll try to negotiate with them to get them to cover the other portion. If they don't, you'd be responsible for the gap. Or 3, they don't offer anything. And I love what he said, because he made this decision demonstrating he's completely unattached to the outcome. One of two things will happen if that takes place. 1, I'll just say, hey, if you feel comfortable working with the listing agent directly, right, and having them kind of work both sides of the transaction, and you not having representation there. Notice he's making that like not super
attractive.
Fantastic, right? It's very intentional, right? So, but if you're okay with that, then great. I will let you do that, and not let you. Like, I would suggest that you do that, and fantastic. Or if you're like, no, you notice he did it again. I want my agent. You notice how he did that? It's all choreographed. It's all super intentional. And you want me to be fighting for you tooth and nail to look out for your best interest, then that would be a situation where you would be responsible. And then at the end, what I love what he said is that like any other professional, an attorney or whatever, he bring up other professionals. This is how we will be compensated. And then when he got to the end, no dilly-dallying. Like, are you clear on how this works? Yes. Do you want to proceed? And would you like us to work with, like, be your buyer's agent? Yes. Great. I need you to sign this, please. And then that's it. And then we move forward, right? So it's very structured. Again, value. Here's how we get compensated. Ask for the business. How about you, Jose? Any observations, any awarenesses?
What I came up with was just creating your list of whatever your value proposition is. I thought that was great because it's our list. Our list is really simple. It's just, I think, three things. Is just we have access to off-market deals because obviously we are the dominant listing team out here in Ventura County. We have a 90% offer to acceptance ratio, meaning 9 out of 10 times when you submit an offer through us, you're going to get your offer accepted. Part of that is the relationships. Part of that is our process for when we submit offers. And then the third thing is just experience, like we've sold close to 1,000 properties. So obviously we know how to negotiate and that sort of thing.
Same.
So,
well, and I'm wondering, Neil, because somebody, Sean San Jose, just asked the question where I also would imagine, which we've had to do all the time anyway. Okay. Because, prior to this, a seller would say, well, Neil, if you bring the buyer yourself, right, we have a conversation. And agents have been negotiating, throughout history. If that happens, they make a business decision about what they're going to be willing to do. And in this instance, because of these changes, I think it's a conversation that you need to bring up. Like you need to, as you're talking about and you're coming to an agreement in terms of professional fee, you need to put it on the table in the event that we do procure a buyer. Here's how that works. What are your thoughts on that?
I want to answer Sean San Jose's question here first, because it's germane to this discussion. Neil, would you negotiate with the buyer on your 2.5% of the commission if the buyer won't pay the full 2.5%? Let's go back to the whole idea that I'd cut him to the wolves and not even ask him to pay me, right? If that presented itself. I really want to encourage people to take a long-term view of how these buyers are going to be evaluating you. A, if he buys that home and you don't get compensated, who do you think he's going to call to sell it in a few years? B, when he tells everybody what an amazing job, okay, go look at our reviews, okay? They're all real. When he tells everybody what an amazing job he did, okay, meaning me, Neil, or whomever, it wouldn't necessarily be me, it might be a salesperson on my team, of course, helping him, and then not even forcing him to pay the commission. How many people, how many reviews, how much goodwill as this kind of unfolds and we sort it out, do you think that's going to create? The answer is way more than 2.5%. Okay? So in answer to Sean's question, anybody who knows me knows I'm really good at getting a full commission when I list property. And I say that with no ego. I say that because I believe we're worth what we get compensated. But this situation where you've asked me, would I reduce, let's say the seller will only credit, let's say 2% instead of 2.5%. Would I force the buyer to pay the other 0.5%? What do you think?
No.
I'm going to be the hero. You know what, Sean? We've been looking for a while. You've trusted us. I know you're going to refer your friends and family. I'll get my broker to sign off on the 2%. Don't worry. You use the money for a housewarming gift. Okay? That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
love that.
Well, I think it's the difference between a short-term thinker and a long-term thinker. Neil's over here thinking about like the goodwill that it creates long-term. Most people are focused just short-term, that extra 0.5%.
I suspect, Jose, that the public is going to be looking at us at a level that they really haven't for the first 6 to 12 months of this, right? And some agents are going to make some poor decisions, and some agents are going to cut their fees. Let's be honest about it. I'm going to go up against listing agents that walk in and say, why would you offer any commission? I'll sell the darn thing for you. It's going to sell in a week, right? And that's going to happen, friends. And you have to be okay with the fact that you are going to not be chosen as you sort out how this works. And you watch the homes with no commission not sell, and then bring them up at your next listing presentation. You know, gosh, Aaron, it was an option to not offer anything. It's kind of like people that go out overpriced.
Yeah,
and
same.
you circle days on market to your prospect and go, 89 days on the market? Is that an option?
Yeah. So so for a
zero commission and didn't sell, is that it's the same thing?
The same thing. And I really appreciate you bringing that up, because for someone who's skilled, like it's like, okay, so let's say they're like, well, why would I do that? It's like, yeah, I understand. I mean, I see where you're coming from, but you know, on the way over here, I was thinking, I mean, you shared with me, you really have to have this home sold in the next 120 days, which means we have to be under contract in the next 60 days, because it usually takes 45 to 60 days to sell. Tell me this, Neil. What would happen on the outside chance if you were still sitting here 120 days from now and it wasn't sold? What would that mean for you and your family?
I mean, how many times have we role played this, Aaron? It's
my gosh, like a million zillion times. You know what I mean? And how many times you would point out to me where I would be like, what? Well, right there, you got to ask, what would that mean for you and your family if that happened? And they're like, well, that would be terrible. I see. So with that being the case, gosh, I mean, let's look at these other properties they aren't offering out compensation. I know that for a fact. I mean, they've been on the market for 89 days and they haven't sold yet. Gosh, I mean, that really doesn't seem like that would work for you and your family, does it? Like, so for those who know how to present, this is fine. Like, we've been doing this all the time. It's just that what I'm aware of is the vast majority of agents are buyer heavy. They don't go on a lot of listing presentations. And as such, they haven't been having these conversations, you know, I don't know, 300 times a year or whatever it is, however many listing appointments, you know, we all go on. So I think this has been incredibly helpful, incredibly instructive. Drop in the comments. Go ahead and drop some fire. Show Neil some love. What I call Neil the ambassador of Quan. You know what I mean? You know, we could do this again, brother. Again, we appreciate you taking the time.
Maybe 6 months from now, once, you know, we're navigating this, right? I'd be 100%. Interested in questions then. Hey, I'm having trouble with this, or has this happened to you, or, you know, whatever, right?
I love it. And I'm super appreciative of, you know, the time that I've got to spend with you. It's made a huge impact on my career, on my kind of craftsmanship, and by extension, you've had that impact on Jose. So let's go. Let's grow. Elite Builders coast to coast.
All right, grandson. Keep up the good work.
All right. Thanks, man. Bye.